been called one of the bloodiest battles in the entire Civil War. Thousands of young men met their fate while defending a cause they held deep in their hearts, and it all happened right here in Franklin, Tennessee, nearly 150 years ago. Join us as Mayor Ken Moore and Parks Director Lisa Clayton host this Franklin Insider special presentation, along with Communications Manager Melissa Ryerson, plus Parks and Recreation Foreman Deanna Scheffel, and historian Thomas Flagel will take you to some of the most notable Civil War sites in Franklin. With guest Tennessee Tourism Commissioner Susan Whitaker, Williamson County Convention and Visitors Bureau Director Ellie Westman Chin, New York Times bestselling author Robert Hicks, and author and historian Eric Jacobson. You're watching the countdown to the Sesquicentennial of the Battle of Franklin, the greatest story of the Civil War.
Welcome to this Franklin Insider special presentation. Thank you for joining me as well as my co-host, Parks Director Lisa Clayton.
Thank you, Mayor Moore. It's great to be here today on historic grounds of Carnton Plantation. Later in the show, we're going to learn the important role this location played in the Civil War.
You know, there is a lot of anticipation in the air as our city comes together to retell the greatest story of the Civil War, the Battle of Franklin. In fact, the Parks Department has had a big hand in preparing our historic parks for the many visitors that are going to make their journey here to Franklin.
We have, Mayor, you know, it's really a team effort. And in fact, two projects that I have taking place right now in the Parks Department is one is at Fort Granger. We're actually building a ADA accessible bridge over into the fort. And then here at Eastern Flank Park, we actually are brought in 70 tons of topsoil in order for the earthworks to be recreated for the reenactment that will be here in November.
There are a lot of amazing presentations to get to, so let's hear from the city's communication manager, Melissa Ryerson, who is on the square in downtown Franklin. Things look a little bit different down there, I understand, Melissa. Give us a rundown of what's happening.
Hi, Mayor and Lisa. Yeah, things are looking a little different here on the square in Franklin. You know those cannons that everyone loves to take pictures with and the kids like to play on? Well, they're gone. They're missing. And here to tell us why they're gone and what's coming is Sam Whitson. He's part of the Cannons on the Square committee that is making this all happen. Sam, what's going on?
Well, hello, Melissa. Thank you for asking. We in the process of replacing the 4 Civil War cannons that we've been on the square since around the turn of the 19th century. And these cannons are known as Model 1841 6-pounder field guns. And they've been on these concrete mounts for years. It looked like something the Navy put out here, but actually they're U.S. Army cannons. And so with the help of the committee and the State Historical Commission, the State Wars Commission, and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and volunteers, we have been able to replace the concrete mounts with authentic reproduction, national park quality gun carriages. They're known as #1 field carriages for these appropriate 6-pounder field guns. So a lot of volunteers and a great help from the city staff.
We have some pictures of the guys doing the work, and they're not here yet. They will arrive in October prior to the Sesquicentennial, just in time for those hordes of visitors that will be coming. Now, this really was a joint effort. What was the cost and how did it all split up?
Well, we received approximately $10,000 in private donations from civic organizations and individuals, and we also, the city of Franklin, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, allocated $31,000 for the project, and the state of Tennessee gave us $20,000. So the total cost was going to be around $60,000. We met it, and also with the help, I got to say, the Save the Franklin Battlefield organization handled the funds for us and made sure we could get tax donations or tax-free donations to the individuals that contributed, and also to help process the grant application with the state of Tennessee.
Well, that's quite an accomplishment. Congratulations, and this will be so great for citizens and visitors for future generations.
It is, and it's just going to make sure that we don't forget what happened here 150 years ago for our future generation. You know, there's a lot of pop culture. The kids seem to know a lot about that, but not much about the Civil War, and we hope somehow or another we can keep the spark alive of what happened here and influence the development of our nation.
All right, thank you so much, Sam. And if you'd like to know more about some of the activities that are happening around town for the 150th commemoration, let's take a look. Back to you, Mayor and Lisa.
Thanks so much for that, Melissa. We'll be checking back with you throughout the show.
Thomas Flagel, a local historian and author of the History Buff's Guide to the Civil War, will walk us through some of Franklin's most notable Civil War hotspots. His first tale takes us to Winstead Hill.
We are standing on Winstead Hill, the iconic starting point of one of the largest assaults in the entirety of the Civil War. November 30th, 1864, John Bell Hood launched nearly 20,000 troops toward the Federal lines in Franklin, 2 miles away. But a lot of people don't realize that in 1863, the year before, this was the dividing line between the Federal lines and the Confederacy. The Union, in order to occupy this area, had to hold Franklin, and when they did, they had all citizens of a very secessionist town swear a loyalty oath to the Union. Those who didn't swear that oath were deported to this hill, to the Confederacy. One citizen who was having a hard time convincing the Union Provost Marshal of her loyalty to the Union was one Ms. Royce, particularly because her husband was serving with Nathan Bedford Forrest and his cavalry around here. In order to be safe, the Union said, "We don't believe you. You're not loyal, and we're taking you to this point in Winstead Hill and putting you in the Confederacy over that ridge." In order to make their point very clear, they went back to her house, tore it down, and turned it into barracks. I guess it's true. Sometimes you just can't go home again. The Battle of Franklin is oftentimes called the Gettysburg of the West, but if you look at the numbers, that assessment isn't necessarily true. The famed Pickett's Charge on July 3rd, 1863, Robert E. Lee sent 12,000 troops forward to the Union lines. Here on November 30th, 1864, John Bell Hood sent 20,000 troops. Robert E. Lee's men had to traverse a mile of open ground. As you can see, this is 2 miles to the Federal lines that John Bell Hood's men had to traverse. Indeed, Pickett's Charge, the entire battle lasted about 55 minutes. This lasted 5 hours. And as a consequence, Hood lost far more men here than Lee did on the last day of Gettysburg. In assessing the overall damage of these battles, Lee was able to fight another day after Gettysburg, another 651 days to be exact, whereas Hood, for all intents and purposes, destroyed his army here. This was the last grand assault for the Confederacy, and the last chapter in a long and painful saga. It is often said that 6 Confederate generals were killed at the Battle of Franklin, the worst subtraction the Confederacy would ever suffer during the course of the war. Well, technically, 2 were not killed in action here. They died of their wounds. What's the difference? Officially, any soldier who reaches an aid station or field hospital before they succumb to their injuries dies of wounds. And that includes States' Rights Gist, the brigadier who was able to reach a field hospital before he succumbed the night of the battle. The other one was John C. Carter, brigadier general, only 27 years of age. He survived the battle and was taken to a house south of here, the Harrison House, just over Winstead Hill. He recovered slightly and then took a turn for the worse. December 10th, 1864, he died. These 2 were not alone. Technically, officially, 83,700 men, north and south, died of their wounds during the course of the Civil War. Winstead Hill is named after Samuel Winstead, a prominent landowner here in Franklin. A member of the Winstead clan actually suffered a very common fate in the Civil War. His name was Meredith Winstead. Even before Tennessee joined the Confederacy, he joined up in the Tennessee Infantry. May 9th, 1861, Meredith joined Company D of the 1st Tennessee right here in Franklin. He had a rather prominent career. He was doing well, fought well, and went all the way up to 2nd Sergeant. But at the Battle of Perryville, October 8th, 1862, in Kentucky, he was wounded severely in the leg, and the doctors couldn't save it. They amputated. And as we know, there's at least 4 people in his regiment who suffered the same fate. 60,000 people during the Civil War had amputations. It was the most common form of surgery ever performed. Many doctors were called butchers or sawbones for amputating so often, but they knew they had to. The type of bullet at that time, the mini bullet, tended to spread out and tumble inside the body, destroying bones, ligaments, and arteries so badly that the limbs couldn't be saved. They also knew that if you operated within 24 hours, depending on where it was on the limb, the patient had about a 75% chance of surviving. You wait 48 hours and their chances went 50-50. Anything longer than 3 days, sepsis almost always set in and they would die. In fact, though it was a rather brutal surgery, 75% of those who underwent it survived the course of the war, as did Meredith Winstead. He lived to a ripe old age and is buried here at Mount Hope Cemetery in Franklin, Tennessee.
The Tennessee Department of Tourist Development has done an amazing job to bring the Civil War's 150th anniversary into the spotlight. Right now I am joined by Commissioner Susan Whitaker, who is also the chair of the Tennessee Civil War Sesquicentennial Commission. Susan, welcome and thanks for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
It's going to be fun chatting with you and learning what you've been doing in preparation for this important event in Franklin.
And thank you for giving me just a reason to be out here in the beautiful Carnton Plantation behind us.
Absolutely.
Everyone needs to come out here.
You know, the Sesquicentennial commemoration is a big deal, not only in Williamson County, but for the entire state. Tell us what your department is doing to help facilitate events and programs in Tennessee.
Well, you know, you mentioned it's a big deal. It's a big deal nationally. This is a huge watershed moment. When we had the American Civil War and its resolution, it changed everything. It really became the new beginning of what we were as the United States of America. We truly were United States. And the Western theater and its impact on that whole American Civil War, I think so much of that history can be told through the lens of right here in Tennessee. We're the only state where the entire state was designated by Congress as a National Civil War Heritage Area. In other states there are corridors or smaller regions, but we're the only state where we encompass the entire state with that designation, meaning that history took place throughout the entire state. And the battles were important. We obviously, from the Battle of Franklin, but also Shiloh, Chickamauga, Chattanooga, Knoxville, Nashville, and many other sites in between, Stones River. But all of those battles are just a fraction of the story that was happening. And I think what's interesting is when you come to Williamson County, you start seeing the stories behind those battles, things that led up to the Civil War, coming to those battles, and also then the stories of the people who were involved in those. So what I loved was about almost 10 years ago, some of the folks who knew a little bit more about the Civil War than I did, and I'm going to tell you, you can tell from this accent, I'm not from around here originally. I am a Yankee from Chicago, although my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather is John Sevier, the first governor of Tennessee, and so my dad was very proud of that and named my sister Deborah Sevier. So I always had Tennessee and its history kind of in the back of our education, but I really did not understand how important it was and what happened here, how significantly it impacted things. So it was really interesting. Some folks from my department came to me and said, we need to start looking at a way to be able to incorporate what we do in tourism, incorporate the Sesquicentennial, the 150th anniversary or commemoration of the American Civil War. And I thought, you're going to have to tell me, you're going to have to show me. We started looking around. I was bowled over at the amount of history and the stories. So we then asked, at that time, Governor Phil Bredesen, if we could form a working committee, later a commission, gathered 24 scholars, educators. Our state historian, Dr. Carol Van West, is my co-chair on that. And we have had the most wonderful opportunity to put together a body of work that we believe is going to be a legacy that we can leave for all the citizens of Tennessee, but also some tourism assets that are out there now, like the Civil War Trail and our Sesquicentennial events that we've been having, one which is coming up in just a few months, couple of months, here in Franklin, and a TV series, a book series. Those were all really just products of people going, this is important, we need to do this.
Well, I know the Commission has been recognized for some of this work that you've mentioned and apparently has received some awards.
Yeah,
Can you elaborate on that a bit?
And my background isn't broadcasting as far as TV production. However, I have nothing to do with the fact that we've won 4 Emmys for Nashville Public Television, won them. They were the ones that we had partnered with to do a series on the Civil War in Tennessee. We asked them to look at just kind of some unique aspects of the story that hadn't been told before. One of those was what happened to the women. I mean, obviously they lost the men in their lives. Their sons, their husbands were gone. They suddenly were thrust into positions of having to take care of households when they were never asked to do that before. That and the African American, the impact on their lives here in Tennessee, and not just from the USCT, the U.S. colored troops, but also just in terms of their everyday lives. So they had music in the Civil War. That was another one of the topics, but that one won 4 Emmys, and it was up for 2 other Emmys. So we've had a series of 6, and just spectacular broadcasts that they've created.
Wow. Now, I know you're a Williamson County resident, and we're honored that the commissioner is from Williamson County. And having this final event of the Sesquicentennial has to have some special meaning to you.
It does. And you know, I've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to also serve on the board of the Battle of Franklin Trust for the last several years. And that was, I vetted that through the governor. They said, no, that's a great idea. We'd love to have our cabinet members involved in their local communities. And that's when I've actually had an opportunity to learn more about just the impact of what happened here, and not just at Carnton, but also the Carter House and Lotes House and Macklemore House. I think there's just so many pieces of this story. But what's really gripped me and made me so proud of being a resident here is to watch the community who absolutely appreciate and love their history. They love their historic homes. They love the history that happened in those historic homes, and they love to share that, preserve it, and share that with the traveling public. That's where I put my tourism hat on too. I am excited to say that you have an affluent cultural heritage traveler very interested in these types of tourist destinations. They actually spend more than the average tourist. They are very careful to leave a place that they visit in better shape than when they first came. So they're the kind of traveler that you want to have coming. And I am just proud of this community who welcomes them, who genuinely wants them to understand the story of what happened here, and who also sees the value in preserving those places and that history that should never be torn down.
Well, you make so many great points about local involvement, but also you highlighted how many people also want to share that same story of the place and the people and the events that occurred here. And while we've been sitting here, we've been watching kind of a steady trickle of people go into this historic plantation home here. How can citizens and visitors be more involved with this event and learn more about our history?
Well, you can certainly go. We have a great website. You can get to the Civil War information at tnvacation.com, but there's a civilwar150.org website that we have that it talks about different sesquicentennial events that we have coming up. The one in Franklin is coming up in November. You do not want to miss that. I mean, that's also around the Blue-Gray Days that they have here every year. And then it's prior to where they're going to be having, again, the illumination and just the commemoration on the exact battle dates. But this, I would say, if you came out here on any day, and I followed a car from Alabama into the parking lot here, parked next to somebody from Colorado and across from somebody from Massachusetts. That's tourism. That's sharing it's sharing our history, but it's also dollars that come into the community so that you have things that you can do with those dollars, with education, with public safety. I mean, you know, as a mayor, you can't generate those dollars by printing them. That's coming from sales tax dollars, and we love to think as tourism entities that we now are able to be a part of the solution to create those funds for communities to have those other things take place too. But I think if you're interested in getting involved, I certainly know that you would want to be at those events, but you'll also, I would say there's an exhibit here now at the Carnton Plantation that is spectacular, and it just opened in August. You need to come down here. Don't even wait for November to come around. You want to come back for that, but come on over and just see what's here. The exhibit is amazing.
Beat the lines now rather than in
You
November.
may wait a little bit. You won't wait as long as if you wait till mid-November.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
On this special edition. And thank you for what you do for the state with tourism and all the positive impact that you have not only on the state but our community. And we look forward to all the events of the 150th anniversary or commemoration.
You're very kind. It's been my honor.
In a moment, we're going to hear from our local tourism director, Ellie Westman Chin. But first, let's take another walk through history with Thomas Flegel and the assault at the Cotton Gin.
I'm walking down Columbia Avenue pretty close to Williamson County Public Library, and there are a multitude of different cars passing me, and I wonder if they realize they are driving on some of the most hallowed ground in the United States. At least 2,000 individuals were killed or mortally wounded within a third of a mile of where I'm now standing. Right across from the Clayton Park, next to a Domino's that's about to go down soon, this is actually a killing zone. No, it isn't the pizza that's doing it. November 30th, 1864, the Battle of Franklin. This was the epicenter. Right down that road, 2 miles away in open ground with very little artillery support, with a dying sun in a November beautiful day, about 55 degrees, welcomed 20,000 Confederates marching directly to this position. The ironic thing, also heading my way, 1,200 Union troops. They were out there on a rise on the ground and realized they were sitting ducks. One individual said, "I think it'd be best if we just laid down and let the Confederates run all over us." And as a consequence of the mile-long trenches that the Union was hiding behind on that day, this is the weak spot, because that's where those Union troops were running. The one and only opening was right here. To the left for about a half a mile, and to the right for about a half a mile is where the Union lines held. But this was punctured. The Confederates realized if they want to break through and get to Nashville, here's where they're going to do it, by following a human shield. The bloodletting started right away. Well, as we look upon this rise, we realize really close to the Carter House, that's where a large part of the fighting was happening. But there was a diagonal line that reached from the Carter House that goes across this parking lot very close to behind the Domino's, where we'll see this very soon. This trench line created a curve. Enfilade firing, they're calling it. Anybody who walks through this section was eventually finding themselves being shot at, not only from the front and from 4 cannon from the 1st Kentucky, they were also being shot from the side from troops from Ohio and Indiana. This entire battle lasts 5 hours, beginning to end, but the vast majority of people who die in it will be killed in the first 60 minutes. I'm currently walking toward the Confederates at this point into Clayton Park, also known as the Pizza Hut site. And this beautiful park was nothing like what existed during the battle, of course. There was no fence row, no beautiful manicured grasses, no nice little signs. If you were to look in front of you, you would see a diagonal line of Union troops, 20,000 strong. The entirety of this hill held at least 16 cannon, 2 over there from the Ohio battery of the 6th, 4 over there from the 1st Kentucky. This was a death zone, and the men knew it. Nobody better than General Patrick Clayton from Ireland. He knew the best way to lead his men was from the front, and no better day than today, because with the setting sun and the still wind and the smoke and the confusion, the best officers were at the front. But he made that march over 2 miles of open ground to this great, strong Union defensive point. It was so bad, he said, if we are going to die, let us die like men, and he did, somewhere around here. We look at these pile of cannonballs. Many people mistakenly believe this is where Patrick Clayton fell. In reality, we don't know. But over there at the cotton gin site, currently undergoing archaeological digs, the Union line was very close to where that orange fence is. We're inclined to believe, by way of eyewitness reports, that he actually did make it very close to that line, but not over it, before bullets started to pierce his chest, and the man who had been wounded many times before fell dead. Among him, many of his own troops. They realized there was 2 weak points, up this road and right toward the 6th Ohio embrasure, a dip in the line where those 2 cannon were firing out. Cannon can only fire so fast. With the rows of muskets, the men realized if they could at least get by those cannon, they'd be okay, and they headed straight for them. Unfortunately, in those embrasures, though it did take a long time to load those cannon, the men were also armed with shovels and pickaxes and clubs. Many Confederates who tried to make it through that embrasure at the mouth of those cannons were beaten to death. Right now we're looking at preservation in progress. Underneath that plastic, discovered just this week, late September 2014, by Dr. Larry McKee and his team with TRC Solutions, is the Union trench line of the Battle of Franklin, right in front of the cotton gin. In that trench line, he has found a multitude of different objects of great fascination, including mini balls, of course, fragments of uniforms, various accoutrements, a horseshoe, and bits of human bone. One of the reasons why he did is that the battle was so fierce here that much of the fighting became hand-to-hand, and when guns did go off at close range, they tend to tear body parts off their owners. After the battle, the destruction was so bad, and the Confederates held the field, that they realized the best way to bury the Union dead who were around here were simply to fold them into these trenches. It wasn't until 1886 that those Union troops were dug out of these places and around Carter Hill and taken down to Columbia, Tennessee, where the United States Congress had all intentions of making a national cemetery. It would have been actually kind of beautiful because down in Columbia, Union troops and Confederate troops laid almost side by side in a place called Rose Hill. But the dead were not allowed to lie in peace. Those still living had terrible animosity after the war and weren't ready to let it go. That sad story of the Union men who died here in 1864 ends in 1867. A train slowly rolls into Murfreesboro, close to the cemetery of Stones River. In tow are 14 cars loaded with 1,300 bodies, all of them Union troops who were killed during the battle and during the war in Middle Tennessee, dragged from place to place and not finding final rest until late 1867 in the National Cemetery at Stones River. Not the prettiest sight in the world, but to me, it is actually quite beautiful. This is, again, preservation in progress. These buildings will be coming down around about the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Franklin, reclaiming this hallowed ground for generations to come. As unattractive as that may be, it's not nearly as ugly as it was the day after the battle, when sunlight did bask open a rather ugly story. Several civilians who lived close by, including Frances Courtney, came up here to see what had happened that night. And when she approached this spot, she found scores of dead right before her, and then hundreds around her. One of her fellow neighbors and somebody she didn't get along with, a hardline Confederate, Adelicia McEwen, said she could see bodies strewn sporadically about a mile down Columbia. When she was looking over this site, she was trying to imagine what life would be like after this is all over, because the dead here outpopulated the living in town 2 to 1. But fortunately for her, among the living of the soldiers were her brother and her cousin, 2 men who had joined the Confederacy when she and her mother were hardline Unionists. They knocked on the door, came in. It was the first time they had seen those 2 men in 2 years. They embraced, were fortunate that all of them were still alive, despite the fact they were on different sides, could be reunited. But sadly, when the Confederate Army moved on, so did her brother and cousin. Alas, she would never see her brother again. Kind of reflective of many families who bade their loved ones farewell and would lose them by disease and accident, battle and skirmish. And that's essentially how the Civil War gets told and retold, by personal experience. And that's what's so beautiful about Franklin. Those stories we continually rediscover, and the ground we continually reclaim. Of all the sites in the United States that I've been to, Franklin is unique, because it is here where we are not only reclaiming stories, we're reclaiming the very ground upon which those stories took place.
Earlier, we heard what the state has in store for our guests. Now, let's hear what we're doing on the local level from the director of the Williamson County Convention and Visitors Bureau, Ellie Westman-Chin. Ellie, thank you so much for being here with us today, especially on this beautiful day at Carnton Plantation. Now, many of our viewers may not realize that you were here in Franklin before, but now you've taken on a new role and you've moved back. So share with us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. 10 years ago, I worked in Nashville, and I moved to Nashville in '93 to help start the Nashville Sports Council. So primarily my whole career has been in hospitality and in Convention and Visitors Bureau. After serving time, well, that didn't sound right, after being with the Nashville Sports Council, I then popped over and worked directly for the Nashville Convention and Visitors Bureau. I spent 7 years in Atlanta at the Convention and Visitors Bureau there, and then the opportunity came up for me to come back to Middle Tennessee
as president and CEO of the Williamson County CVB, and it was just a great opportunity for me to come back home.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I know that y'all are extremely busy because of with tourism and that type of thing, but we have the Sesquicentennial coming up. So what role has the CVB played in from the planning standpoint?
You know, for me, it was such a perfect time to come in with the 150th right around the corner. It was just an opportune time to really promote Williamson County and Franklin to tourists and visitors. The CVB, quite a while ago, got together a group of folks that really oversee our battlefields and our history, and they came together to say, how are we going to promote the 150th and commemorate what happened all those years ago? So they got together, they created a tagline, Try to Imagine. They created the 150th logo, and from that we've just been promoting the activities of that weekend so folks can come in and experience Williamson County and Franklin and learn about our battle.
Fantastic. Well, you're saying that with the logo and you mentioning all of that, you can't help but be excited when you come down Main Street and you see those banners.
Yes.
So how did the banners and the people on those banners or even just the logo kind of come about?
You know, the banners were such a great idea. I think one of the challenges that we have nowadays is losing our history in general. And so to bring to life the people that were affected by the battle and have people learn about them was just a really genius idea. I wish I could take credit, but I wasn't here when that was created, so I can't take credit. But so they really took a lot of time. There's 12 different people featured on the banners, and they took a lot of time to make sure that it was women and men and children and civilians and military. So it's not just folks that fought in the battle, but it was anybody in town that was affected by the battle and their role in Franklin and what they were doing then.
See, I think that's such a unique way in order to share the story, but even if you're not familiar with the Sesquicentennial, or you truly do see that something is happening within our city. In saying that, you know how special this place is. And so people, we are rich in people giving of their time. And so what would you say if someone wanted to be able to volunteer or get involved? How would they do that with you all?
You know, what I am really enjoying about the 150th and the activities is I think we have something for everyone. And however you like to get engaged in history, you have an opportunity to do that. So for instance, Robert Hicks is doing on November 13th at the Franklin Theater, A Guitar and a Pen, an old-time radio show. So it's musical and it's teaching folks what it was like back in those days. But if you're really a Civil War history buff, then we have the reenactments happening. So, you know, just look around, and then of course working with the state, we have their signature events happening at the Franklin Theater. So there's going to be lectures and historians coming in so you can learn about things from their perspective as well. So I think it's what is it that you like to do and come out, because I think we have it covered here.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. And so if you want to, you've mentioned so many wonderful things. And so if you're, for our viewers that are going to watch this later, where do they go to get a list of the events?
They can go to franklin150.com and there's a complete list of events. So on there it will tell you if it's a free event, like the state of Tennessee's events are free. And although they're free, we're still asking folks to register because we need to have a count of how many people will be attending. It'll tell you if there's a cost or when the tickets go on sale and so forth, but they can find everything on franklin150.com.
Wonderful. Listen, thank you so much for being here and sharing this information, and I know that we're excited to have you in our city.
Thank you.
And I look forward to working with you myself.
Same here.
And when we come back, we're talking with New York Times best-selling author Robert Hicks, who wrote an amazing book about this very place. Stay with us.
You're watching the countdown to the Sesquicentennial of the Battle of Franklin, the greatest story of the Civil War.
Good morning, Franklin. It's another beautiful day in the neighborhood. Local news is coming up next. We'll check the weather and the traffic. You have a great day out there.
want to say good evening, Franklin, Tennessee.
Welcome back. Right now I'm happy to introduce best-selling author Robert Hicks. He wrote a captivating book, The Widow of the South, and has had a unique role in the preservation efforts of our battlefields and historic sites. Robert, thank you for being with us today and taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk about an important event that's coming up and what your role has been in the preservation of history of Franklin, Tennessee. So why is it so important to preserve our history here in Franklin?
Well, you know, of course, the obvious answer would be it's a dollar and cents kind of thing. I mean, it is the number one reason that every study ever done in the last 15 years says why people come here to Franklin. So if we want them to shop in our shops or eat in our restaurants or spend their money, then we need to preserve our history because it's the reason why people come here. But more importantly, I think it's the whole depth and meaning of our lives. Without an understanding of where we've come from, of who we are, we're somehow lost as a people or as a community. This is the essence of what is Franklin, and without it, we really, it's like we've lost our compass. We have it. We have a rich, powerful history. It's in a sense, it's not even just our history. It's almost a national patrimony. Important things happened here. It's in a sense, I guess, to sum it up, history really is our future.
Well, what are some of the projects you're working on right now?
Well, you know, I'm that guy that you dread seeing. I'll be running over to you and your wife and others because I'm the guy that's always got his hand out and trying to ask for money for what we're trying to do here. I mean, you have to understand, like in 2003, 2002, Franklin was probably the prototype of probably the worst battlefield preservation in the nation. When all of a sudden we went from the 10 most endangered battlefields to lost, and in the 11 or 12 years since then, we've gone from possibly one of the worst examples to by far the poster child for preservation when it comes to Civil War battlefields. And it's been done by this community. It's been done by leadership like yourself and the aldermen. It's been done by the rank and file of people like me that are simply saying there is a lot out there that we can and should preserve. And so right now, what am I doing? I'm going around asking people for money for almost 3 acres just south of the Carter House. And when we finish that, I'm sure I'll be asking money for other things. But I'm also doing a few other things during this year I'm excited about. I want to restore the McGavick family cemetery. Carrie McGavick was simply a person who her greatest strength was that she remembered. Not just that she helped create that cemetery, but that she spent the last 39 years of her life remembering over it. Well, in the years since, her grave and her husband's grave, her in-laws have all been vandalized. And so one of my pet projects this year is raising the money to restore the cemetery. But there's a lot of these little projects. They all seem to involve my handout, but that's all right. When it's all over, people will forget that part and maybe remember the good parts.
And you have such a special talent for painting that picture for people to want to be involved. And you mentioned several acres there on Columbia Avenue, but the bigger picture is somewhere around 20 acres on Columbia Avenue are going to be recaptured.
It's unbelievable what's happening between the city's efforts, the state's efforts, and the private efforts. I mean, where else in America do you have this kind of group of people all coming together to work on this level? That the Carter Hill Battlefield Park will be over 20 acres when we finish. And again, it couldn't be done without the state and their involvement. It couldn't be done without the city. I mean, the city's the one that came in and secured the Pizza Hut property. And it certainly couldn't be done without the overall giant private effort of this community. It's an amazing place to live, where people really do care about not just their future, but about the past.
Well, with the 150th coming up, is there one particular event that really catches your attention, something that in your mind is the most special event of the 150th commemoration?
You know, Mayor, the truth is there are so many, but I'm going to try to go through a few of them. There, of course, is the reenactment, which will be on the 15th and 16th of November. It'll be an amazing reenactment. It's an extraordinary event. There is the illumination, which will be here on the actual date of the battle, the 150th anniversary. It will be an extraordinary illumination. Then we go to. We have several theater events going on, including I'm going to do one of my radio shows, and it'll be like the Civil War Comes to Franklin. But we also have Allison Brown and Claire Lynch and a host of others are coming out here on the 14th of November. It'll be at the theater. The state, I'm on that commission, and the state's doing a fantastic job of putting together a day of events on the day of the 14th of November. And so I don't know which I would choose, you know. I really hope that people will come to all of them, I guess.
Well, it certainly is a special time in our city with so many great events.
Absolutely.
So many people coming together to support the commemoration of the Battle of Franklin, and we certainly appreciate your role in it. How can people get more involved and learn a little bit more about our heritage as a community?
Well, that's great. I think one way they can do it is to go to the city website. Another way they can do it is go to the CVB website. They're doing a fantastic job of listing things. We've got the Heritage Foundation's work, and of course the Battle of Franklin Trust's work in preserving history. They have fantastic websites. And so there's a multiple of avenues for people to go to just to simply to learn about it, and I hope people really will.
Well, Robert, it's always been fascinating talking with you and learning more, and I appreciate your enthusiasm. And as we look out in the distance there, we're actually looking at the Eastern Flank battlefield and Collins Farm. In just a few minutes, we're going to hear from Thomas Flagle talk to us about the importance of the Eastern Flank battlefield during the Civil War.
We're far away from the epicenter of the Battle of Franklin, about a half mile from the Cotton site in the Carter House, on the far eastern flank of the battle. And even though very few people really know about this area, perhaps they should know that topography shapes it more than anything else. Right over that line, barely visible to you and me, as well as to the Confederates, is the Harpeth River. This angled across their line of approach and squeezed their army farther and farther inward, making troops start to overlap with their commands and other regiments, adding to the confusion of the darkness and the gun smoke. These poor individuals on the extreme right flank were also running up this hill toward the Nashville-Decatur rail line to a very well-defended area where mostly Indiana troops and several pieces of artillery were aiming straight toward them. And in front of it all was a mass of recently chopped down orange Osage abatis trees, abati, sharpened limbs pointing directly at them, tangles they couldn't get through. The individuals who were coming in this direction never broke through. Gunned down by muskets and cannon fire, slaughtered in a place that would never become famous. We now know it as Collins Farm and Lewisburg Pike, the very pike that actually stood at that point. But it became so bad that the Confederates actually started moving toward the deadly epicenter because this was even worse. One of the individuals who fell here was a brigade commander by the name of Thomas Scott. He had made progress up to this point and then realized there was nowhere else to go. And then a shell burst over his head, shattering internal organs to the point where he's bleeding out of orifices and his spine is severely damaged. He is taken back to the McGavock house, propped up against a wall, and starts to assume he's going to die. He doesn't. But he lives the rest of his life as an invalid, unable to ever be as strong as he was or as his fellow men were that fateful day in November. We are currently at the Eastern Flank Battlefield, 110 acres of recently preserved hallowed ground here in Franklin, Tennessee. And this is earthworks, fabricated here in order to, for the best of our abilities, recreate the Battle of Franklin. We're going to do this for the 150th anniversary in November this year. But in reality, even though we're going to see Union and Confederate reenactors here, Union troops weren't in this location, at least not at this time. But here, across these very fields, the right wing of John Bell Hood's army of 20,000 Confederates marched across and into that horizon, and several of the men had but minutes to live. But the interesting thing is, that's not the first Civil War story about the Eastern Flank. It was actually in this field that there were several units who were formed around here and from other counties, men joining up in McGavock's Grove with their horses, accoutrements, and guns to march off to war in 1861. In 1862, the Union Army went down Lewisburg Pike, came to this large open field, and camped here on their way to a place called Shiloh, and a battle that would kill thousands of them. In 1863, you might not want to hang around here. This actually was used as target practice from artillery units stationed over at Fort Granger, recently constructed in March of '63, right over that hill to the north. But in 1864, this is where it truly turns into hallowed ground. Right past McGavock house of Carnton, these men were actually starting to become in range of that artillery fire. About 400 yards beyond where we're standing, they started to become in direct range of musket fire. Then as today, it was rather beautiful and warm. Then as today, the sun was setting in the west. But unlike today, there would be about 2,000 men to die in less than 5 hours. More Americans would die in these fields and over that horizon in 5 hours than died in the first 24 on Omaha Beach, June 6, 1944, on D-Day. One of the reasons it became so deadly is that the sun was setting. It was getting dark. One of the reasons why it became so deadly is that it was a beautiful day, warm, a little muggy. The sun was setting, but the air wasn't moving. When the guns started to fire, the smoke started to billow. And one of the reasons it became so deadly is because of this eastern flank bent toward town, crunching the Confederate army into a tighter and tighter packed mass. Over that hill, Fort Granger, when they were firing into this direction, they had a hard time missing. The columns were so thick, especially when they were crossing the Nashville-Decatur rail line. The Union Army was able to shoot right down that path and kill men by the scores. We oftentimes consider ourselves divided country today. I think all I have to do is walk these fields and realize we fight our fights today with freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of peaceful assembly, but back then, we were trying to commit fratricide, and unfortunately we were succeeding, especially on days like November 30th, 1864. We're on the road to Carnton Plantation, the home of John and Carrie McGavock during the Battle of Franklin. And Carnton had a problem. It was perfect. Access to clean water, right next to a major road, large rooms, wonderfully bright, beautiful windows, perfect for a field hospital. This would be the largest field hospital out of 44 from the Battle of Franklin. And around you, you would have seen around 300, mostly Confederate men, dead, dying, wounded. And John and Carrie took it as a matter of course, did everything they possibly could to help these men be as comfortable as possible, some of them in the last moments of their life. Among those assisting John and Carrie in their endeavors, to care for the wounded soldiers, are Hattie and Winder McGavick, their 2 children. Hattie is 9 and Winder is 7. But these children were able to ably handle the entire situation and live the rest of their lives relatively stable, having men bleed to death in their own home, and many men staying for several weeks after the battle to be cared for by them and others. And yet, despite these traumas, the children do not lose their affection for their dear home. And in fact, just over that hill in a place called Windermere, Hattie marries her husband, George Cowan, a veteran of the Civil War, and live out the rest of their lives right next to the place where they saw among the worst of American history. By 1862, the American Civil War had grown out of such proportions. The United States Congress had to invent something they never had before: national cemeteries, depositories for the tens of thousands of dead that were starting to pile up. They were hoping they'd only need 10 of them. By the end of the war, they had 73, and this place is not one of them. Confederate soldiers were forbidden to be buried in those hallowed grounds of federal funding, and as a consequence, private citizens and churches had to bury their dead who belonged to the men in gray. Over 80% of Confederate soldiers were buried in church and city cemeteries, and this private cemetery is one of the largest. Over 1,400 human beings who had died at the Battle of Franklin and during the occupation of the Union Army in 1863 are buried here. When you walk through this gorgeous place, you'll see quite readily that they are buried by way of state. Well, the assumption might be that's old states' rights showing its way through again. In reality, states' rights was not a major figure. This is a national army fighting here. The Army of Tennessee actually consisted of regiments, batteries, and cavalry units from every Confederate state in their nation with the exception of Virginia. They are buried by way of states for one purpose and one purpose only, and the Union troops are buried that same way. For closure, this is how their living veterans would be able to find their old comrades. They were joined by states, they had their regiments by states, they were buried by states. Men would be able to come here and find their old friends, say thank you and goodbye, and find closure. The ironic thing is the eastern flank is a place of bloodletting, it's also a place of peace. The cemeteries where the veterans and the families of the fallen would come and find peace from a war that killed somewhere around 700,000.
Thank you, Thomas. Author and historian Eric Jacobson joins me now at his home away from home at Carnton Plantation. Eric, thank you so much for coming out on this beautiful day with us. And for our viewers, share with us what drew you to the story of the Battle of Franklin and to Carnton, actually.
It was just the story. I was always drawn to the story. I mean, for the first time I ever read about it, there was something about this story that was different, I think, than any other Civil War story. And then when I first visited, it was, you know, the history drew me here, and the history drew me in even further. But it was really the town, the community, the area. It was beautiful. People were wonderful. There was something about the area that I loved from the moment that I first came here, and so I decided to move here at a later date. Absolutely. Now you are the Chief Executive Director of the Battle of Franklin Trust, and you have been in that position how long? I guess it's been about 4.5 years now. I've been here almost a decade. I served in a number of different roles, but I guess it's been about 4 years now. Fantastic, and just beautiful property. So again, we thank you for allowing us to come out on the property today. We have the Sesquicentennials coming up. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that we've been talking about today in this program, and Carnton and Carter House actually has quite a few programs that they are doing through the months of the Sesquicentennials. Share with us what's happening at both places. Well, October and November will both be really busy. We've got a Descendants reunion in the first weekend of October, which are just folks who are descended from soldiers who fought here, although the public is certainly welcome to attend. And we've just got a number of small events kind of on and off through October. We've got some specialized tours of the battlefield and of the homes. But then November becomes a completely different situation. We have the state Sesquicentennial event, our annual Blue and Gray Days event, and the reenactment all sort of balled up in one about 4-day period: Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th. The reenactment Saturday and Sunday, the 15th and 16th, at 2 o'clock each day, and our tickets for that event went on sale on Monday and will be for sale through the end of October. Weather's good, which it usually is that time of year, 60, 65 degrees during the day. We could have 5,000 or 6,000 people a day. We've got about 1,000 reenactors evenly placed both sides, and we'll be out on the eastern flank, adjacent to Carnton. So it's going to be a great event. We'll be having 2 battle scenarios, different ones. Saturday is the Columbia Pike, Carter House area of the fight, and then Sunday is the action that actually unfolded on eastern flank. So folks can choose to attend both or buy tickets just for one day or the other.
Well, you mentioned, and we're at least looking at around 5,000, so you're talking about selling tickets. So they went on sale on the 15th.
Mm-hmm.
So they're sale right now. How much do they cost, and where would they go to find those?
You can buy the tickets at Carter House or Carnton, or they can buy them online through our website, which is battleoffranklintrust.org. It's $10 for adults, which is anyone 13 and up, and then $5 for children. Kids under 6 are free. Although, as we've said in the press release, we're advising folks, because of the volume of fire and just the sheer spectacle of it, it's might not be for toddlers and infants. But I know that there'll be a lot of folks who will want to come out. It's just going to be a great event. It'll be something that people have never. Well, I don't think it'll be anything like they've ever seen, and it'll really be the last event, I think, of this size for some time. I mean, it's the 150th, so we'll be doing something that really is very unique.
Absolutely. If you had to choose, and I know it's hard because we have so many great events and so many organizations that are involved with this, but in your perspective, if you had to attend one event, what would it be?
You mean if it were me?
If it were you.
The illumination. I would be here on the anniversary of the battle. I think there's something about an anniversary of any major event, doesn't matter what it is, to be there on the day of the event, and that day is, there's no huge spectacle like a reenactment or sort of the pomp and circumstance that sometimes go into other events. That day is the 150th anniversary of the event that forever changed the history of this town, and by connection, the history of our country. And people can visit the homes and they can just sort of soak it in and really reflect on what happened that day. And then that night, as the sun goes down and darkness covers the landscape, to see 10,000 luminaries, which we have said this year after year after year, and that I think this year has particular poignancy, that each one of those represents not just a person, but scores of other people who were impacted by this event. Wives, children, parents, brothers, sisters, all across the landscape. So one luminary impacts 15, 20, 25 different people. So you have 10,000 casualties that probably impacted 250,000 people, north and south. And that happened in this town, on the outside of it, outskirts of it, on one afternoon in 1864. I think that's the event I'd go to.
Absolutely, absolutely. Eric, I've heard you mention many times over the years, one of the most important things you can do is to continue to share this story. And we thank you for that. And we thank you for coming on our show today. Well, we don't have to go far to show you an exciting exhibit happening right here at Carnton Plantation at the Fleming Center. Melissa Ryerson will take us on a tour of Battle Scarred.
Battle Scarred, the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Franklin. This is the newest exhibit here at Carnton Plantation, and here to tell us about it is Joanna Stevens. She's the curator for Carnton and the Carter House, and this is a brand new exhibit featuring some really unique items. It opens August 2nd and is only here temporarily. Tell us about it.
Well, Battle Scarred is actually going to be running through the anniversary and then continuing through April 26, 2015, which is a significant day for us. That's the day the Army of Tennessee surrendered in North Carolina, and so of course for them that was the end of the Civil War. So when guests actually come in, they'll be entering through the gift shop once they purchase their ticket, and we're going to go through really the war chronologically. So a little bit about 1860, 61, all the way through to the beginning of 1864, and then we'll primarily focus on the Battle of Franklin itself, of course, November 30th, 1864, and included in the display are actually some items that were here on the fields of Franklin used during the battle.
Yeah, I noticed there are some very personal items that were used by some of the generals, some of the soldiers. This is a unique collection because it hasn't been shown in its entirety for many, many years. Tell us about it.
What we can see here is actually the frock coat and pants, gauntlets, spurs, and straps of a soldier who fought here at Franklin. His name was William Summerfield Sawrie, S-A-W-R-I-E, and that collection was actually given to the Carter House during the Centennial celebration, so 50 years ago, and it was actually donated by a man who lived in Franklin, Sheffield Clark.
This is one of the last parts of the exhibit. It's called Todd's Story. We can't show it to you out of respect to the family on video. You have to come see it, but what can people see of Todd Carter here?
Well, Todd Carter's story is so well known, of course. He fights in the Battle of Franklin, wounded on his own farm just several hundred yards away from the house where he grew up. He is shot 9 times during the battle, mortally wounded. The family brings his body back to the house in the middle of the night, of course, after the fighting is over, and on his body some personal possessions, among them his sword and his wallet. Those were kept by the family, and they are on loan to us for the first time ever. They will be seen publicly.
Now that is very, very neat. How can people come and see this exhibit? What does it cost, and when is it open?
The exhibit is open during our regular business hours, so Monday through Saturday, 9 to 5, and Sundays, 11 to 5. The exhibit costs $10 to go through, and it will be up, as you said, from August 2nd through April 26, 2015.
All right, thanks, Joanna. Come out and see Franklin's history right here at Carnton Plantation.
When we come back, Thomas Flagel shows us the writing on the wall from soldiers quartered at the Masonic Temple in downtown Franklin. You don't want to miss this. Don't go away.
You're watching the countdown to the Sesquicentennial of the Battle of Franklin, the greatest story of the Civil War.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
Well, it's not really an emergency, it's loud music.
Okay, hold just one moment. I'm going to transfer to the non-emergency number, okay, so we don't top a 911 line.
When it's not a life or death emergency, dial 794-2513. 794-2513. Yes, 794-2513. My neighbor's music's too loud, you see. Dial 794-2513. 794-2513. That's 794-2513. Thank you. I dialed 794-2513, and the Franklin police, they answered me. 794-2513. 794-2513. When it's not a life or death emergency, dial 794-2513. That's 794-2513.
911, what's the location of the emergency?
There's not an emergency. I need the non-emergency number.
I'm Mike Wolf, and I am a Franklin resident, and when I want to be in the know, I watch the Franklin Insider. Who has time for the news?
And welcome back, everyone. Lisa, this has been really an educational show, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely, Mayor, and actually there's more to come. Thomas Flagel is taking us on a unique location.
And I understand that unique location is the Hiram Lodge number 7 on 2nd Avenue, one of the oldest buildings in Franklin. So he will be conducting a tour there, showing us some inside information about the lodge.
That's right. Wait until you see what they're preserving on their wall.
That sounds interesting.
We are standing next to Hiram Lodge number 7, Masonic building constructed in the 1820s, said to be the first 3-story building made west of the Alleghenies. And indeed, it would be a very large constructed site itself in the Civil War here in Franklin, as it would be the site of a federal garrison and hospital during the course of the war. When you're talking about the Masons, you're essentially talking about time, and that includes Hiram Lodge number 7 here in Franklin. It was formed in 1809. It is the longest continually working lodge in all of Tennessee. Just celebrated its 200th anniversary. It also took time to become a Mason, over 6 months, as it still does. And this was a bit of a problem for several families who were facing the outbreak of the Civil War. They wanted their sons and brothers to be part of a moral foundation before they joined the ranks. But they didn't have the half year to spare to become a Mason. Well, Grand Master of Tennessee, James McClellan, found a way around. Even though he didn't want brother versus brother fighting each other, especially Masons, he offered a special dispensation. For those who would join the lodge before they joined the ranks, they could get in a matter of days rather than months. And indeed, hundreds of Tennesseans took him up on that offer, including 31 from Williamson County. In the spring of 1861, Adelicia McEwen, the young daughter of the town's mayor, recalled that in her hometown, speeches inciting men to take up arms and defend their homes were made. Women gathered at the Masonic Hall to sew and make uniforms for their war relatives and friends. Representatives from all over the country and town gladly answered the call to help clothe the boys. If these walls could talk, and they kind of do, they could tell you the story of a building that suffered during the course of the war. Any prominent building in any town that was occupied by Confederates or Union alike would have men in it, using it for a garrison, outpost. This is a 3-story building, so it was excellent for a spy base that both Confederates and Union used. In the spring and summer of 1863, Union troops used this as a garrison place. Nice and comfortable. They got a little bored and made their mark literally. This wall is evidence of that. Preserved to this day, it shows the markings of Union troops, several of them from Michigan, who stayed here. One that was rather prominent is right here. One, John S. Cottrell of the 14th Michigan. That was the last Union regiment left behind in the summer of 1863 to hold this place, Fort Granger and the town itself, as the rest of their comrades marched toward Atlanta and the eventual end of the war.
Mayor, that was fascinating.
What a neat walk through history. And thanks to author and historian Thomas Flagle for his insight on one of the oldest places in Franklin.
Our Parks Program Coordinator was lucky enough to get an exclusive tour of her own with Pam Lewis. She owns the historic Harrison House off Highway 31.
This was the house where General Hood decided to storm the Union lines. However, there was some resistance from General Forrest. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Deanna Scheffel, and today we're at the Harrison House and we're with owner Pam Lewis, and she is going to give us a special tour, and it's a special treat for us to go into this historic home. It's right adjacent to Winstead Hill, and today we get to go inside. So Pam, would you like to take us in?
Come on in.
Pam, this is beautiful.
Oh, well, welcome. We're
Thank you.
actually in the new part of the house. When I say new part, it's circa probably between the 1840s and 1850s. Now this house has kind of an interesting history, not just because it pertains to the Battle of Franklin, but the original part of the house is actually now the back of the house. It was Federal style, and originally there was construction here in 1810 and up through 1826. It was owned by William Harrison, who was sheriff for Williamson County. The wall coverings are appropriate to the period. There's a fleur-de-lis. These are all stenciled on. This is a chestnut staircase here, and the floors are red cedar. And most of the floors are original to the house, largely poplar, some pine. The kitchen does have new flooring, but I've tried as much as possible not to replace things that would not be in character with the home. The color scheme, everything is appropriate. But it is also a very lived-in house, and I have animals, and we just saw Claire Barton run up the stairs, my cat, and so it's here to, I'm shepherding the house, I'm stewarding the house, but I don't want to have velvet ropes all over the place. So this would have been living space, the kitchen would have been separate. Of course, they did have slave labor. We have some documentation that the favorite slave's name was Dennis. And if you go over to the sink area, well, over to where the sink is, you actually can see where there was an old window, and there's square peg nails, and some of the patina, the original patina, is on here. Actually, my mom refinished this. Here's an old nail. So that would have been looking out to a dog trot, which is kind of a open courtyard area.
Okay, it looks like we're in the dining room now. What can you tell us about in here? This is beautiful.
Well, thank you. Again, this is a typical period wallpaper. There's a lot of gold in the wallpaper, so when have a dinner party and have candles, it picks up the gold, which is kind of nice. All of the antiques are pretty much bought locally, some in Kentucky, and yard sales, and I'm a bargain hunter. So, but a couple of things in this room that are of interest. The floors are original to the house. They're yellow poplar, and I've taken a beating and show it here and there. And also, the chandelier is Fostoria crystal and Czechoslovakian crystal. And there's something called a girondelle, which is a 3-candle candelabra, which is in the middle of the fireplace mantle. And that was actually a gift to the Harrison family by Fountain Branch Carter's family of Carter House fame.
Okay, Pam, tell us about this room. I think this is the room that you were mentioning that has quite a long history here.
It does. As you're driving down Columbia, if you look at the house, actually it's on the first floor and it's on the right. This was the room that Confederate General John Bell Hood gathered his generals in and decided to attack Franklin. On that fateful day, November 30th, 1864, of course, the battle began at 4 p.m. It was an Indian summer day. They had just had a terrible occurrence in Spring Hill. The Confederate troops went to bed. They posted no sentries along Columbia Pike. The Union snuck past them, joined up with Schofield's troops. They were well armed. They had artillery. Hood awoke. This was at Ripavilla, livid that this had happened, blaming everyone, quite angry, and marched the troops north on Columbia Pike, stopped here in Franklin, went up to Winstead Hill, and all of this, of course, there's markers and people can explore it. Went up to Winstead Hill, looked down on Franklin and said, we're going to fight. Came in here, began his plans. Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was one, of course, the famous general, Confederate general, was one of his generals, and he knew that this was certain death, that the Union were very well entrenched. The boys were tired, they didn't have their artillery. This was not going to be a good decision. And of course you did not challenge your commanding officers, but Nathan Bedford Forrest did. And he famously said to Hood, who by this time had been very seriously wounded. First, Battle of Gettysburg, his arm was in a sling, had atrophied and it was not usable. The second thing, Battle of Chickamauga, he was very badly wounded. His leg had to be severed just below the hip, so you can imagine the wound. And in fact, he had to be strapped to a saddle. He could not sit upright without getting into the saddle with help. Yeah. I'm assuming he was in a great deal of pain still. And Atlanta had already fallen, and this was a last-ditch attempt to try to capture Nashville back and to try to win the war. So desperate men do desperate things. And so when Forrest heard that he had in fact decided to attack, Forrest thought that was foolhardy and screamed at Hood, storming out of this door, down the steps that when we first entered, and said, if you were a whole man, I'd whip you within an inch of your life, to Hood, very angrily. Now, he did survive the battle. Hood survived the battle. Forrest survived the battle. Forest Crossing, which is a subdivision now, is referring to where forests crossed and part of the battlefield. Of course, the battlefield was quite large, and unfortunately some of the other generals, which I'm sure you've mentioned in this series, did not survive, and many, many people were lost. The house upstairs will have 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and 2 sitting areas. So there are not a lot of rooms, but the rooms are pretty good size.
Right.
And you can see sort of this is a little bar area, and it's the other side of that window.
So that's where the original portion ended, right there. So this was more like an open
area.
little quad area. Or
exactly, like a little courtyard. And you can see on the bricks, if you rub your hands, I love it because you can feel where the original ivy was growing there. So the roots are still on there.
Oh, I see them. Yeah.
Yeah, you see. So
you can see the markings there.
A lot of character.
Yeah. So it's kind of, it's been designed around the old
exactly.
building and kind of brought up to date here.
So this room actually is really the only room that I have kind of comfortable furniture, and everything else has a lot of antiques.
Den area.
Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough.
Oh, my very, very sincere pleasure.
We never get a chance to do these kind of things, especially when it's a private home, to come inside and see some of the history of the area. And we drive by it all the time, but it's not on the house tours, and it's not, you know, one of our museum houses that are around. So, and because of its proximity to Winstead Hill, it was all kind of all flowed together one time, which is a city park that we have interpreted too. So I can't thank you enough for being with us today and showing us your lovely home, and it's very, very interesting.
Well, thank you, and preserve our history. Protect the future, preserve the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna, and thank you, Pam, for opening your home to our cameras.
And before we go, let's check one more time with Melissa Ryerson. She has some important transportation information.
Yes, Mayor. One of the biggest events is the reenactment that's happening on November 15th and 16th. Now, it's not happening here at the park at Harlansdale Farm. It's happening over at the Eastern Flank Battlefield. But people can park here and ride. And here to tell us about it is the Executive Director of the Franklin Transit Authority, Debbie Henry. Debbie, tell us about it.
Oh, Melissa, we are so excited to be part of this wonderful event. We will be providing free shuttle service back and forth to the reenactments at Carnton, Plantation during those entire days. And what we'll be doing from 10 o'clock in the morning till about 5 or 6 o'clock that evening, we'll be providing shuttle service from Harlansdale Park and from the parking lot at the Carter House. Those will be the 2 satellite locations for parking. It is important to note that while the parking is free for this event, the reenactment is a ticketed event, and so you need to have your tickets before you come park here at the park. So show us your ticket to the reenactment, and you'll be allowed to park here at Harlansdale or at the Carter lot, and we will be picking you up. We'll just have continual shuttles from 10 until 5 or 6, both Saturday and Sunday. Do want to encourage folks, though, to come early because they're going to close the Carnton location at 12:30 for admission because they want to be able to have everybody settled in before the reenactment started too, understandably. So you can purchase those tickets to the event right now at the Carter House or the Carnton Plantation, or you can go to battlefieldtrust.org and purchase the tickets online.
Yeah, most likely you won't be able to purchase them that day, so get them ahead of time. You'll need them to get on the trolley here at Harlansdale Farm or the Carter House, and remember to come early so you can get to the park before 12:30, and then after the event it may take a while to get everyone back to their cars, but it will happen. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. We'll have numerous vehicles running in the shuttle all during the day, so you make a good point. Make people aware that it may take us to the second or third loop, but we'll get you back to your car.
All right, thanks, Debbie. So park and ride right here at Harlansdale Farm and Carter House. Lisa and Ken, back to you.
Thank you for that information, Melissa. Well, that wraps up this Franklin Insider special presentation on the Battle of Franklin's 150th anniversary.
If you want more information, please visit the websites at the bottom of your screen. If you are watching us on YouTube, please share this show with your friends and subscribe.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mayor, for having me.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.